The sun was still low when Mira sat by the window, watching the dust rise from the street. Her hands were folded on her lap, but her mind was heavy with thoughts. The people outside were already whispering about her again. They always did. In this small village, no one's life stayed private for long. Mira was 19, quiet and round-faced. Her body was heavier than most girls her age, and that was what people saw first. They didn't see her gentle nature, or the way she cared for her younger brothers, or how she always helped her mother with chores. They only saw her size. Every festival, every wedding, every visit from relatives came with the same cruel jokes and pitying smiles. "Poor girl," the aunties would say, lowering their voices, but not enough.
"Who will marry her?"
"She eats too much, that's why she looks like that." Mira heard it all. She never answered back, though sometimes she wanted to scream. Instead, she would walk to the backyard and sit under the mango tree, where she could cry quietly and let the tears dry before going inside again. Her father, Dinesh, was a proud man. He worked at the local grain shop and cared deeply about what others said. Every rumor, every whisper about his family made him anxious and angry. When Mira's mother tried to comfort her, he would frown and say, "If she just showed some discipline, this wouldn't happen." The world respects only what it sees, so Mira began to eat less. She would skip meals, telling her mother she wasn't hungry. But hunger was not the only thing that weighed her down. It was the shame, the constant reminder that she wasn't what others wanted her to be. One afternoon, when the sun was blazing and everyone stayed indoors, something happened that would change her life. A few neighbors had gathered near the well, talking in sharp, excited voices. Mira's mother went out to see what was happening. When she came back, her face had gone pale. "Someone saw Mira near the old pond yesterday evening," she said softly, looking at her husband. "They say she was sitting there with a boy." Dinesh's face darkened. "A boy? Which boy?" "No one knows," her mother said quickly. They assumed it wasn't true. Mira had gone there alone to sit by the water and watch the birds fly home. She often went there when she felt too sad to stay indoors. But the gossip spread faster than truth ever could. By evening, the whole village was talking. Some said she was seen laughing with a stranger. Others said she had been meeting him for weeks. None of it was real, but in a place where reputation was everything, rumors were stronger than facts. Her father's anger exploded that night. "You've brought shame to this house," he shouted. "Do you think we can hold our heads up now? Who will marry you after this?" Mira tried to explain, crying and trembling, but he wouldn't listen. Her mother pleaded, but it only made him more furious. The next morning, without telling Mira, her father made a decision that would shock the entire family. There was an old farmer named Hari who lived at the edge of the village. People said he was poor, that his land had gone dry and his wife had died years ago. He had no children and lived alone, working from dawn to dusk. When Mira's father met him that day, he made an offer. "You need someone to cook for you and take care of your home," he said. "I'll give you my daughter in marriage. You don't need to pay anything. Just take her. Let her live with you." Hari looked surprised but calm. "I'm not looking for a wife, Dinesh. I live a simple life," but Dinesh insisted. "Take her. It will be good for her. She needs discipline, a place where she can learn what hard work means." By evening, everything was decided. Mira didn't even get a say in it. Her father came home and announced, "You are getting married tomorrow." "That's final," she froze. "Married? To whom?" "To Hari, the farmer. You'll live with him. It's better than being talked about here." Her mother started crying. "At least wait, Dinesh. She's too young to live like that." But he silenced her with a glare. "Enough, I'm doing what's best for her. People will stop gossiping once she's married. It's her punishment for bringing shame." Mira didn't sleep that night. She lay awake, listening to the crickets outside. Her little brother slept beside her, unaware of what was happening. Her mother came quietly into the room and sat beside her, holding her hand. "My child," she whispered, "I don't want this, but your father won't listen. Wherever you go, remember this. Don't let their words make you small. You are kind. You are good. That's what matters." Mira hugged her and cried until she had no tears left. The wedding was small and silent. No music, no dancing. Only a few elders and 2 witnesses. Mira wore a faded red sari that belonged to her mother. Her eyes were swollen from crying, and she barely looked up during the ceremony. Hari stood beside her, calm and serious. He was not old. maybe in his 30s, but his face looked weathered from years in the sun. After the rituals were over, her father didn't even smile. He simply said, "Do your duty. Make your husband's home your world now." Mira wanted to say goodbye to her mother, but the women had already started whispering again. "She should be grateful someone took her," one of them murmured. Those words stung more than anything else. When Mira reached Hari's home, she was surprised by how quiet it was. The house was small but clean. There was a wooden bed, a clay stove, and a few old pots neatly arranged. Beyond the house stretched fields, dry, brown, and endless. Hari carried her small bag inside and said softly, "You can rest. There's rice and lentils on the shelf if you're hungry." Then he went outside without another word. Mira sat on the bed staring at the empty room. She felt like she had been dropped into another world. No one to talk to, no one to understand her. She thought about running away, but where could she go? Her father would never take her back. The villagers would laugh. That night she cooked for the first time in her new home. She wasn't sure how much to make, so she cooked enough for two. When Hari came in after dark, he washed his hands, sat on the floor, and ate quietly. He didn't complain or praise her cooking. Afterward, he said, "You can sleep early. Morning starts before sunrise here." The days began to pass slowly. Mira woke up at dawn, swept the floor, washed clothes, and helped with small tasks around the field. She wasn't used to so much work, and her hands blistered easily. Still, she never complained. Hari remained quiet but respectful. He never shouted or scolded her. He worked all day under the sun, his shirt soaked with sweat, his hands rough from digging and planting. At night they would sit outside on the porch, watching the stars. Sometimes he would tell her about farming, how the rains had failed last year, how he was trying to grow new crops. She listened silently, not knowing what to say. The villagers began to gossip again, but this time the tone was different. "Poor Mira," they said. "Married to a man who owns nothing. Maybe this will teach her humility." But Mira was learning something else entirely. She began to notice things she had never seen before. The cool wind before sunrise, the sound of birds calling across the fields, the smell of wet earth after a rare rain. The silence that had once scared her now felt peaceful. One evening she saw Hari sitting by the edge of his land, staring at the horizon. There was something calm yet distant about him. She hesitated, then walked over with 2 cups of tea. He looked up and smiled faintly, accepting one. "You work hard," he said quietly. "You don't complain." "I have nothing to complain about," she replied. "You treat me kindly." He looked at her for a moment, then said, "People said I was poor when I married you. Let them talk. What they say doesn't feed us, doesn't water the land. Only work does that." For the first time, Mira felt a small warmth in her chest. No one had ever spoken to her like that. Not her father, not the neighbors. That night, as she lay down to sleep, she thought about his words. Maybe this new life wasn't punishment after all. Maybe it was something else, a beginning she hadn't expected. That night, as the crickets sang outside, Mira finally fell asleep without tears. For the first time in years, she didn't dream of escaping. She dreamed of a green field under sunlight, full of new plants ready to grow. She didn't know it yet, but this quiet, simple place would soon show her a world she had never imagined. The morning in Hari's house always began before the sun rose. The air would still be cool and filled with the sound of birds waking up. Mira would step outside with a small brass pot, collect water from the well, and start the fire in the kitchen. Smoke would curl up into the soft light as she boiled rice or tea. Her hands had become rough from work, but she no longer minded. Hari would already be in the field by then. He never slept late. She often saw him from afar, bending over the soil, his back straight and steady. He didn't talk much, but he never treated her harshly. If anything, his silence felt kind. At first, Mira didn't know how to talk to him. She had grown up in a house full of noise. People shouting, neighbors gossiping, children crying. Here the quiet was almost too much. The wind spoke louder than words. But slowly she began to understand that silence could be peaceful too. One morning, while she was sweeping the yard, she saw Hari return with a bundle of vegetables. He set them down and said, "These came from the lower patch. The soil there is starting to breathe again." She smiled shyly. "That's good. I can make curry with these today," he nodded. "Make whatever you like. Eat first before you serve me." That surprised her. In her father's house, women always ate after everyone else had finished. Here, Hari told her to eat first. It made her feel strange. but a quiet warmth grew inside her heart. Days turned into weeks, and the rhythm of life began to settle. Mira woke early, cooked, cleaned, and learned how to help in small ways around the field. At first, her body ached from the hard work. Her feet would burn from walking barefoot on dry soil, and her arms would tremble after carrying heavy buckets. But after some time, the pain turned into strength. She no longer felt tired so easily. Her face began to glow from the sun and her steps became lighter. Sometimes she would sing softly while working, old songs her mother used to hum while washing clothes. Hari never said anything, but once she saw him pause in the field, listening quietly before returning to his work. In the evenings, they would sit outside the small house and drink tea. The sun would paint the sky orange and the fields would shine like gold. Hari would tell her short stories about the land, how his father had taught him to read the sky, how the color of the soil could tell him if rain was coming. One evening, Mira asked softly, "Do you never get lonely here?" He looked at the setting sun before answering, "Lonely, sometimes. But this land keeps me company. It listens. It gives back what you give it." She didn't quite understand at first, but she liked the calm way he said it. Life moved gently like that. The villagers had stopped talking about Mira now. Some said she had changed, that she was quieter, thinner, more peaceful. Others whispered that the poor farmer had turned her into a worker. But Mira didn't care anymore. For the first time, she didn't live for their approval. She woke up each morning knowing exactly what she had to do, and that gave her peace. One afternoon, as the sun burned high, she saw Hari loading sacks of grain onto an old bullock cart. He looked tired but focused. Curious, she asked, "Where are you taking these?" "To the next town," he said. "There's a buyer who takes my crops. I'll be back by tomorrow morning." Mira hesitated. "Do you need help?" He smiled faintly. "No, you rest. Keep the house safe." After he left, Mira felt strange. The little house felt emptier than before. She swept the floor twice, cooked her dinner early, and sat by the door waiting without realizing it. The night was quiet, but she couldn't sleep. She kept listening for the sound of the cart wheels on the road. When he finally returned the next morning, covered in dust and smiling faintly, Mira almost felt relief. She didn't say much, but she quickly brought him water and food. He thanked her, and for the first time their eyes met with a sense of comfort that words couldn't describe. Over time, they became companions more than strangers. Hari began teaching her about the land, how to tell when the soil needed water, how to recognize good seeds, and how to mix compost. Mira listened carefully and learned fast. She discovered she had a natural patience that made her good at tending plants. The small vegetable patch she planted behind the house started to bloom. Green chilies, tomatoes, and spinach grew bright and healthy. One day when Hari returned from the field, she showed it to him proudly. "Look," she said, smiling for the first time in a long while. "These grew faster than I expected." He examined the plants and nodded approvingly. "You have a good hand. Plants feel the care you give them." That praise meant more to her than any compliment she had ever received before. In the evenings, she began to ask him small questions. "Why do you work alone?" Or "Don't you have family elsewhere?" He would answer simply, "Everyone's gone. This land is all I have." Then he would look out over the horizon and fall quiet. Mira didn't push him further. One night, when the moon was full, Mira sat outside with her hands folded around a cup of warm milk. She looked at the sky, filled with stars, and thought about how much her life had changed. A few months ago, she was sure her world had ended, that she had been sent here as punishment. But now she wasn't so sure. The village gossip no longer reached her. The noise of judgment had been replaced by the rhythm of nature, the call of birds at dawn, the whisper of the wind through the fields, the hum of crickets at night. Her body felt lighter, her heart calmer. One day while working in the field, she suddenly noticed Hari standing by a large tree, watching her quietly. When she looked up, he said, "You don't tire easily anymore." She smiled. "Maybe I'm learning from the land, like you said." He nodded, then turned away with a small smile of his own. As the days went by, Mira began to notice small things about him. He would always make sure there was enough water in the house before leaving. He fixed her broken pot without her asking. When it rained heavily one evening, he stood outside with an umbrella until she had safely crossed from the kitchen to the house. He never said much, but his care showed in quiet ways. The villagers still thought he was a poor man with nothing left. They didn't know about the trips he took to other towns or the people who sometimes came to see him. Speaking in hushed tones near the edge of his land, Mira didn't ask, but curiosity slowly grew in her heart. One morning, she saw him counting a bundle of papers and keeping them carefully in a locked box. When she asked what it was, he simply said, "Records, just old things." She didn't question him, but a thought stayed in her mind. There was something different about this man. Something he didn't show to anyone. As monsoon approached, the air became heavy with moisture. The fields began to turn green again and new life started to appear everywhere. Mira loved walking barefoot in the soft mud after the rain. One afternoon, while they were planting new saplings, she looked up and said quietly, "I never thought I would live like this." Hari asked, "Do you miss your old home?" Mira thought for a moment. No, there was noise there, but no peace. Here there is silence, but it feels alive. He didn't reply, but a look of quiet understanding passed between them. That night, as they sat under the porch listening to the rain, Mira felt a strange calm. She realized that she no longer felt like a burden or an unwanted girl. She was becoming part of something growing, something real. She had come here thinking she was being punished, but life had given her a second chance instead. And though she didn't know it yet, the man sitting quietly beside her was not the poor farmer everyone believed he was. The truth about him, and the life waiting for her, was far greater than she could imagine. For now, though Mira was content to sit there, watching the rain dance on the fields, the smell of wet earth filling the air, and the gentle rhythm of her new life echoing softly in her heart. The morning sun spread a soft glow over the fields as Mira walked barefoot through the moist earth. The smell of the wet soil after rain filled her heart with peace. She had never thought she would come to love this life so much, a life that began as punishment but was slowly turning into something she couldn't imagine living without. Every day followed its quiet rhythm now. She cooked, cleaned, helped in the field, and learned something new each week. Hari still didn't speak much, but his few words always carried warmth. He was patient when she made mistakes and never raised his voice. One morning, while she was washing clothes by the well, Hari came by with a few packets of seeds wrapped in cloth. He placed them carefully on the small wooden table near the kitchen. "These are new ones," he said. "Try planting them near the back fence. Let's see how they grow." Mira looked at the small packets curiously. "They don't look like the seeds we usually use." "They aren't," he replied with a faint smile. "I brought them from a man in the next town. He says they grow well even with little rain." She nodded and kept the packets safely. That day she dug a small patch behind the house and planted them just as he had told her. When the work was done, she looked at the soil, dark and wet, and smiled. Something about putting seeds in the ground always gave her hope. Weeks passed and the plants began to sprout. They looked different from the others, taller, stronger, greener. When she showed them to Hari, he studied them carefully and said, "You've done well. You have the touch for this." His words made her cheeks warm. "I just followed what you taught me." He looked at her for a moment and said softly, "No, you gave them life. That's something you can't teach." From that day, she started to help him more closely in the fields. He began to show her things she had never noticed before. How to tell the age of a plant from its leaves. How to read the sky for rain. How to protect the soil when floods came. Every evening, they worked together until the sun began to set behind the hills. Sometimes they didn't speak for hours, yet there was a quiet understanding between them. A peace that didn't need words. One day, when they were working near the far end of the field, Mira noticed a narrow dirt path leading beyond the trees. It seemed to disappear into the hills. She looked at it curiously and asked, "Where does that road go?" Hari glanced at it briefly. "Just to the upper fields. Nothing much to see there." But there was a flicker in his eyes. Something he didn't say. She didn't ask again, but her mind kept returning to that small hidden path. A few days later, Hari told her he needed to go to another town for work. "It will take me a day or two," he said, tying his bundle of papers and tools. "If anyone asks, tell them I've gone to sell the grain." Mira nodded, though she didn't understand why he needed to hide such a simple thing. After he left, she took care of the house and the fields as usual, but curiosity tugged at her heart. That small path near the trees seemed to call her name. The next morning, she decided to walk a little way down it, just to see. She tied her dupatta around her head and set off after finishing her chores. The path wound through tall grass and bushes. Birds flew up as she passed, and the air smelled of wildflowers. After a while, she began to hear the faint sound of water. When she reached the top of a small rise, she stopped in shock. Below her stretched acres of green, not dry land, but fertile fields full of crops. There were large sheds, workers moving between them, and a few carts loaded with vegetables. She saw machines, too, new ones she had never seen before, with bright blue paint and shining metal wheels. She stood there for a long time, trying to understand what she was seeing. She had thought Hari owned only the small patch of land where their house stood. But this was huge. She wanted to ask him, but she also felt a strange hesitation. Maybe he didn't want her to know. Still, the thought refused to leave her mind. When Hari returned 2 days later, he seemed tired but content. He brought with him a bag of rice, a few tools, and some books about farming written in another language. Mira waited for the right moment before asking softly, "Where do you really go when you say you're selling grain?" Hari looked up slowly.
Why do you ask?
"I saw the big fields near the hills," she said honestly. "I didn't go inside. I just saw them from far away." He didn't seem angry. He was quiet for a long moment, then sighed. "So you found out." She bit her lip. "I didn't mean to." "It's all right," he said gently. "You should know the truth." That evening they sat outside as the sky turned golden. Hari began to speak slowly, as though each word carried weight. "Those fields belonged to my father. He built them from nothing. Everyone thought he was just a poor farmer too, but he studied, learned, and worked harder than anyone. By the time he died, he had turned this dry land into thousands of acres of fertile soil. I grew up helping him." Mira listened in silence, her eyes wide. "When he passed away," Hari continued, "people came with fake smiles and greedy hearts. They wanted to take everything. So I did what he once told me, to live quietly, work honestly, and never show the world more than it deserves to see. I let them think I was poor. It gave me peace." He looked at her and smiled faintly. "When your father offered you to me, everyone said I was doing you a favor. But I didn't take you out of pity, Mira. I took you because I saw how they treated you. I saw someone who deserved a life where no one's opinion could hurt her again." Tears welled in her eyes. She had never heard anyone speak to her like that. "I didn't tell you before," he said softly, "because I wanted you to know me as I am, not for what I have." She couldn't speak. Her throat was tight with emotion. For the first time, she realized that the silence she had once feared had been full of truth. Hari was not a poor farmer. He was a man who had chosen simplicity over pride. That night, Mira couldn't sleep. She thought about everything he had said, about how life had brought her here through pain and shame only to give her something beautiful in return. The next morning, she went with him to the hidden fields. This time, he took her proudly through the gates. Workers greeted him with respect. Some called him Babu, and others folded their hands. She saw his calm smile as he spoke kindly to each one of them, asking about their families and needs. When they reached the center of the land, she saw large greenhouses made of glass and bamboo. Inside, rows of fruits and vegetables grew in neat order. Hari explained how he used new irrigation systems, how water from the nearby hills was stored and reused. Mira listened with amazement. "Why don't people know about this?" she asked. He smiled. "Because peace is lost when pride walks in. I live quietly, and that's enough." She understood now. The man everyone pitied was, in truth, wiser and richer than any of them, not just in money, but in heart. As they walked back, she looked at the endless fields glowing under the sun and said softly, "You've been growing more than crops here. You've been growing goodness," he laughed quietly. "And now I'm not doing it alone." That evening, when Mira sat by the window, she felt something deep inside her shift. For the first time in her life, she felt proud, not of how she looked, not of what others thought of her, but of the person she was becoming. Her life had been full of hurt and judgment, but now she knew that kindness and hard work could turn even the harshest soil into fertile ground. Just like the land around her, her heart had begun to bloom again, and she didn't know it yet. But this was only the beginning of a future that would change not just her life, but the lives of many others in the village too. The morning after Mira saw the hidden fields, she woke up early, her heart still full from everything she had learned. The soft sound of the birds outside felt different now, as if the whole world had opened a door she didn't know existed. She looked out the window and saw Hari already walking toward the fields, his shoulders straight, his step steady. For the first time, she didn't see him as the quiet, poor farmer people spoke about. She saw him for who he really was. A man of quiet strength building something good far from the eyes of those who only knew how to judge. That day, she decided she would no longer be a quiet helper. She wanted to be part of his work, to understand his world and help him grow it. After breakfast, she walked to where he was working. "Can I come with you today?" she asked. Hari looked up from the cart he was loading. "You already work too much. Rest today." She shook her head. "I don't want to rest. I want to learn." He looked at her for a moment, then smiled softly. "Then come." And so began Mira's new chapter. The fields beyond the hills were alive with people. Workers moved through rows of plants, cutting weeds, collecting fruits, and carrying baskets. The smell of soil, sweat, and ripening crops filled the air. Mira followed Hari through the fields, her eyes wide with wonder. Everywhere she looked, she saw life, strong plants, clean water channels, and the shining faces of men and women who worked with quiet pride. Hari greeted each one of them by name. He asked about their families, their health, their children's school. "Why do you know so much about all of them?" Mira asked as they walked. He smiled. "Because they grow this land with me. Without them, none of this would exist." His words stayed with her. She realized that what made him great was not just what he owned, but how he treated people, with respect, with care. Over the next few weeks, Mira began to learn everything she could. She spent her mornings with the women who sorted the vegetables, her afternoons helping with the seedlings, and her evenings with Hari, as he explained how water systems and soil testing worked. At first, she didn't understand much, but her curiosity kept her going. She took notes on old pieces of paper, drew rough pictures, and asked questions without hesitation. Hari encouraged her. "You learn fast," he told her one day as they were checking the irrigation pipes. She laughed. "Maybe the land is teaching me too," he smiled. "The land always teaches those who listen." Word began to spread quietly through the nearby villages. People started hearing stories about how the quiet farmer's wife worked in the fields beside him, how she talked to workers kindly, how she sat under trees teaching their children letters in the evenings. Some laughed at first. A woman from that family, the one everyone pitied, but laughter slowly turned into surprise, then respect. One day, a few village women came to visit Mira. They stood awkwardly at the door at first, unsure how to speak to her. "We heard you're teaching reading to the children of your workers," one of them said. "Can you help ours too?" "They don't go to school." Mira smiled warmly. "Of course. Bring them in the evenings. We'll sit near the porch. I'll teach what I can." From then on, her evenings became full of laughter and small voices reciting letters and words. The same house that once felt empty now echoed with life. Hari would sometimes watch from a distance, a quiet smile on his face. As months passed, Mira and Hari became partners not just in life, but in purpose. He trusted her with decisions, and she began managing parts of the land herself. She made sure the workers had fair pay, clean drinking water, and simple meals during the long harvest days. She even suggested starting a small kitchen where the women could cook together for everyone during busy weeks. Hari listened and agreed. "You think of things I don't," he told her one night as they sat watching the moon rise. "You make this place more human," she smiled gently. "You built the land. I only added a little care." He shook his head. That's what it needed. Soon, traders from nearby towns began to visit the estate more often. They were surprised to find that the poor farmer they had heard of owned not just land, but the best-managed farm in the region. They tried to persuade him to sell parts of it, but he refused every time. "This land is not for sale," he said firmly. "It feeds families. It gives people work. That's worth more than any price." Mira admired his strength. She saw how easily greed could have changed him, but it never did. He continued living simply, wearing the same old clothes, eating the same food, sleeping on the same cot beside her. Yet now, their simple home had something money couldn't buy: peace, purpose, and respect. One evening, as they sat together watching the sunset over the fields, Hari said quietly, "You've changed everything here, Mira. You gave this place heart." She looked at him, her eyes soft. "I thought my life was over when I came here. But it was just beginning," he nodded. Sometimes the hardest path leads to the most beautiful field. After that, Mira's role grew even more. She started organizing small gatherings for women from nearby villages. She taught them how to grow kitchen gardens, how to save seeds, how to sell vegetables at the local market without being cheated. Her gentle nature and calm strength made people listen. Some of the same women who once mocked her weight and her marriage now came to her for advice. Mira never held grudges. She smiled and helped them all. Her health had changed too. She was still full and soft, but now her body was strong. Her face glowed from long hours under the sun, and her laughter had returned. She no longer cared about what others thought of her body. She cared only about how she lived and how she treated others. Sometimes, in the quiet of the night, she would sit by the window and remember the girl she once was, the one who cried under the mango tree, who felt unworthy and unwanted. That girl still lived inside her, but she had learned that worth was not given by others. It was grown, like a seed, from within. A year passed, and the farm flourished more than ever. The fields were full of life. The storage sheds overflowed with harvest, and new workers came seeking employment. Mira and Hari worked side by side through every challenge, storms, droughts, and long nights of planning. One day, the head of the village came with a group of elders. They stood in front of the main field, looking at the green stretch of land. "We came to see this place with our own eyes," the head said. "They said it was rich and big, but we didn't believe it." Hari nodded politely. "You're welcome to see it." The elders walked around in silence, astonished. "You did this quietly," one of them said. "No one even knew," Hari simply smiled. "Not everything good needs to be loud." When they left, Mira looked at him with quiet pride. "They'll never look down on you again." He turned to her and said, "It doesn't matter if they do. What matters is that we look forward, not back." That night, as the stars covered the sky, Mira felt something deep in her heart. She realized that the land, the work, the peace, all of it had healed her in ways she never thought possible. She had been given away as punishment. But life had turned that punishment into purpose. The world that once laughed at her now respected her. But more than that, she respected herself. As the wind whispered through the fields and the smell of the harvest filled the air, Mira smiled to herself. She didn't need riches, applause, or fancy words. She had found something far more precious, a home built on honesty, kindness, and quiet strength. And though the journey ahead was still long, she knew one thing with certainty. She was no longer the girl who was sent away in shame. She was the woman who had turned that shame into growth, one seed at a time. The morning sun touched the golden fields, and Mira stood quietly by the window, watching the workers arrive. A soft breeze moved through the trees, carrying the smell of fresh earth and ripening crops. Life on the farm had found a rhythm, steady, peaceful, and full of meaning. But things were beginning to change beyond the farm's borders. News of Hari's land and Mira's work had spread far and wide. Traders, government officers, and even young students began visiting to see how the couple had transformed the once barren land into a place of life and hope. Everyone wanted to know their secret. When they asked Hari, he always gave the same answer. "The land grows when you treat it like a friend, not a tool." When they asked Mira, she smiled and said, "And people grow when they are seen with kindness." Their words touched many hearts. One afternoon, a small group of people from the nearby town came to visit. Among them was a young woman who looked nervous. "I heard you teach women here," she said softly. "I want to learn too." Mira welcomed her in and handed her a small stool to sit. "You are welcome here. We learn from each other." Soon more women began to come. Some wanted to learn how to grow vegetables, others wanted to learn how to sew or read. Mira didn't have a proper classroom, but she used what she had, the shade of a big tree, her patient heart, and her belief that small steps could change lives. She often said, "It doesn't matter how little we have. What matters is what we do with it." The farm became more than just land. It became a small school, a community, a safe place for those who had none. Even Hari noticed how people listened when Mira spoke. He would watch quietly from a distance, his heart full of quiet pride. "You've built something I couldn't," he told her one night. "You gave people courage," she smiled. "You gave them work. Together we gave them hope." Months passed, and their work caught the attention of people beyond their village. One day, a letter arrived from the district office inviting Hari to speak at an agricultural fair. He had never spoken in public before, but Mira encouraged him. "You don't need fancy words. Just speak the truth," she said. So they traveled together, dressed simply as always. When Hari stood on the stage, surrounded by men in suits and shiny shoes, he felt small for a moment. But then he looked at Mira, sitting in the front row, smiling softly, and all his fear disappeared. He spoke about the soil, the seasons, and how kindness built stronger roots than greed ever could. He told the crowd how a person once seen as poor could be rich in spirit and purpose. When he finished, the hall was silent, then filled with applause. Reporters wrote about the humble farmer and his wife, who had changed the meaning of success. When they returned home, the villagers who once mocked Mira now stood at their gate waiting to greet them. "We saw you in the paper," one of them said. "We didn't know you were doing such great things." Mira only smiled. "It's not great things," she said gently. "Just small things done with care." She didn't hold anger for their past words. She had long since learned that resentment was like carrying a stone in your pocket, heavy and useless. As time passed, more and more people started visiting. Some wanted to learn, some wanted to copy, and some just came to see if the stories were true. Hari and Mira welcomed them all. One evening, an older woman arrived at their doorstep. Mira recognized her at once. It was her aunt, the one who had once convinced her parents to send her away. The woman looked smaller now, her hair streaked with gray. She held her shawl tightly around her shoulders, her eyes full of hesitation. Mira felt her chest tighten, but she smiled anyway. "Come in, Aunt," she said softly. The woman stepped inside, her eyes scanning the room, simple but clean, full of warmth. "You've done well," she said finally. "Better than any of us expected." Mira poured her water and said nothing for a moment. The woman sighed. "We were wrong about you, child." "I'm sorry. I thought sending you here would be your end. But it seems it was your beginning." Mira's eyes softened. "Maybe that's how life works. Sometimes pain plants the seeds of something better." The woman nodded slowly, tears welling in her eyes. "Your parents would be proud." That night, Mira sat by the window long after her aunt had left. Hari joined her quietly. "You're thinking of the past?" he asked. She nodded. "I used to hate them for what they did. But now I see if they hadn't sent me here, I wouldn't have met you. I wouldn't have found this life." Hari looked out at the moonlit fields. Maybe fate doesn't always take what it seems to. From then on, Mira made it her mission to help more women who were cast aside like she once was. She reached out to the local officials and requested a small piece of land beside their farm to start a training center for women, a place where they could learn farming, weaving, and simple business skills. The officials were hesitant at first. "You don't even have proper funding," they said. Mira replied calmly, "I have willing hands and hopeful hearts." That's a good start. With Hari's help, they built small huts with thatched roofs, dug wells, and planted gardens. Within months, dozens of women joined. They worked, learned, and slowly built confidence. Some even started small businesses of their own. One of them said to Mira one day, "We used to think our lives were over. But you showed us that we can start again." Mira smiled. "I didn't show you anything. You did the work. I only reminded you that you could." It became a place of healing, and not just for those women, but for Mira too. Every story she heard, every tear she wiped, felt like a piece of her own past being rewritten. Soon people began calling her Didi, the elder sister who helped everyone. Children ran to her when they saw her in the village, and men lowered their heads respectfully. But Mira never let it get to her head. She still woke up before sunrise, still cooked for the workers, still sat on the ground to eat with everyone. Her heart hadn't changed, only her world had. One day, as she and Hari walked through the fields, he said, "The government officer from the city is visiting tomorrow. They want to give you an award for your work with women." Mira laughed softly. "Award for what?" "For doing what should be normal." Hari smiled. "For reminding others what normal should be." The next day, the officer arrived with photographers and journalists. They gave Mira a small plaque with her name engraved on it. As the flash of cameras lit the air, she felt shy and awkward. She had never cared for recognition. Her joy came from the quiet smiles of those she helped. That evening, after everyone had left, Hari found her sitting alone by the pond. Holding the plaque in her hands, "You should be proud," he said gently. She looked at him and smiled. "I am, but not for this. I'm proud because the girl they once gave away has finally found a reason to stay." He sat beside her. "And I'm proud because the man they called poor found the richest treasure, a good heart." The wind moved softly over the water, rippling the reflection of the stars. For a long while they sat there in silence, knowing they didn't need words to understand each other. In the weeks that followed, Mira continued her work with more passion than ever. She started teaching young girls about self-worth, about believing in their abilities. She told them, "Don't let anyone decide your value. It's something you carry inside, not something they give." Her voice became a quiet but powerful force of change. People who once looked down on others began to see things differently. Some even started their own farms inspired by her and Hari's story. But through all the growth, Mira stayed the same, humble, grounded, kind. One evening, she stood on the same hill where she had once first seen Hari's hidden fields. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink. She could see the roofs of the workers' homes, the children running, the women laughing near the well. Life had come full circle. As she stood there, Hari walked up behind her. "Thinking again?" he asked. She smiled. "Just remembering how far we've come." He nodded. "And we still have far to go." She turned to him and said softly, "As long as we walk together, I don't mind how long the road is." And as the last light faded from the sky, they stood hand in hand, the once obese girl who had been cast away, and the farmer the world thought was poor, now richer than anyone could ever imagine.